and you're looking at your four quartiles, your bottom, your middle bottom, your mid-level, and then your top. And you're saying, how can I move the bottom level up to the next tier? And then that third tier up to the fourth tier. And I'm always coaching them and helping them and saying, what can we do to help get you there? And that takes deep conversations with people and really analyzing their business and saying, hey, listen, let's take a look at where you're at, where you're going. What do you need specific help with? Is it a listing presentation? Is it a buyer's presentation? Do you need accountability? What does it happen to be?
You're listening to the Real Estate Sessions podcast, and I'm your host, Bill Risser, Executive Vice President, Strategic Partnerships with Rate My Agent, a digital marketing platform designed to help great agents harness the power of verified reviews. For more information, head on over to ratemyagent.com. Listen in as I interview industry leaders and get their stories and journeys to the world of real estate. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 357 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. As always, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for telling a friend. And today we're going to go back out to the Pacific Northwest, one of my favorite areas of the country. And we're going to talk to Jim Remley. Jim is with John L. Scott in Oregon. He's a coach, a speaker, a RealTrends Top 500 broker. Just an amazing story, author. It goes on and on. He's just great stuff. And he's going to drop a lot of important information, I think, for anybody out there that's in the recruiting side of things. If you're a broker owner or if you're a team leader, you want to listen in. So let's get this thing started. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I had the opportunity to kind of do a little research and wow, you've done some really cool stuff over the last, I'm going to say 25, 30 years.
30 years. Yeah. Thank you.
The way I start my podcast every single time, those that listen know it, is I like to find out about you. Let's start out how, where you grew up and where you, kind of that, what's that experience you had growing up? And it looks like Oregon is where you were born and raised. Am I right?
I was born in Long Beach, California, but my family were hippies and they came up to Oregon in the hippie kind of train. And they landed in a little town called Roseburg, Oregon, which is kind of in the middle of the state. And I grew up there. It's a typical, very small town, 25,000 population, and very, very much typical town in America, kind of circa America, right?
Right. And so I would guess that train you talk about. I grew up in San Diego myself.
Yeah,
there were a lot of people in the '80s making this mass exodus for the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yeah.
So this is what you're talking about with the train.
Right. Yeah. Not a literal train, but a train of people coming. Yeah.
It was a lot of people. In fact, there were, I think the locals up there were getting not upset, but like, hey, wait, what's going on here? This is changing pricing of housing and all kinds of stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. There was definitely a backlash. And, now I think most people that live here are transplants, but back then there was more of a backlash.
Right. I think when people think of Oregon, the first thought is Portland, because that's, the big city. That's, where everything kind of revolves around, it feels like. But however, you're in Southern Oregon now. You're in the Grants Pass, Medford area?
Yeah, Medford, Ashland. Yeah, right over the border of California.
Okay, just north of the border. So how would you explain that to somebody who's never been there, who's never been to that part of Oregon? What would we find?
Well, I would say that for the rest of us that don't live in Portland, we don't love the association with Portland. I'll say that. The rest of the state is actually pretty conservative folks that live a very, I wouldn't say conservative, but I should say more of a normal lifestyle, not what you're seeing on the news in Portland, right?
Right.
So when you look at that, what's on the news, it's totally the antithesis of what you see in the 99% of Oregon. So it's just an interesting dichotomy there, but that's the truth of it. It's a very rural lifestyle and people love it. And it's very much the lifestyle, what you'd expect the Pacific Northwest to look like.
How big is Medford?
Medford is a population base of about 80,000.
Okay.
So it's a little bit bigger, but not huge for sure.
Yeah. I have to share a story. My wife and I, she wasn't my wife at the time, she was my girlfriend. We drove up to Canada, to Vancouver for the World's Fair. And on the way back, we decided to come down the entire coast. And so you would know what that route looks like, right?
Sure.
You start
right.
And one of the little communities we traveled through is called Gold Beach, Oregon, right?
Yeah.
Not too far from you.
That's right. Yep.
Okay. And so as we're headed down with Highway 1 or whatever we were going to call it at that time, there was a big giant sign for a pancake breakfast and a fire truck and a couple firefighters that wouldn't let you pass. They said, you're going the wrong way. Go this way to the breakfast.
You're having breakfast.
So we did. We turned left and we went down this road into a little parking area and had the best pancake breakfast I've ever had with the Gold Beach Fire Department and a whole bunch of locals. And it was just a great time. So
that's
for
great.
me, that's Oregon, right?
It is Oregon. That's exactly Oregon.
That and the Tillamook County Fair that we went to one year. That was the same on that same trip. I take it back. It was the same trip we stopped, and it was just so cool seeing, because I grew up in San Diego, which is a little bigger, obviously. So it was really nice to see that small town life in south of Oregon. So, anyways, good. So let's get to the crux of the conversation here. And you got into real estate really young. Right? Because generally, we're going to talk about recruiting and some other things. Sure. You know that it's the second and third careers for the majority of people you talk to.
Absolutely.
But I think I read somewhere you were 19 when you got into real estate. Let's talk about that.
Well, my buddy, his dad owned a real estate company, and he said, let's go get our real estate license. And at the time, I barely graduated high school, and I had ended up working in a lumber mill. And like most kids in Oregon, we worked in lumber mills. So I was working the graveyard shift in a lumber mill, and I was also going to college at the same time. Actually ended up flunking out of college because I couldn't work graveyard and go to school at the same time. Wasn't my constitution. But he said, let's get a real estate license. So I went and studied. I finished. He didn't. I did not go to work for his dad, but I did go to work for the first company I drove by after I got my letter in the mail, which was Century 21. And so I was 19 at the time. And just went in and not knowing anything about anything, just thought I was going to come in and crush it as a kid, right?
Yeah. So I would guess it was kind of lucky it was Century 21, at least, right? Because for a new agent, they were already in the mode of education, training. I mean, they were kind of a great place to start. How long did you stay there?
I was with C21 for 5 years. Okay. I was fortunate. I struggled my first 6 months getting my feet under me, but I was smart in the fact that I did go to all the classes that they offered. Yep. And I did read a lot of books. I attended a lot of seminars, and I just started to take a lot of notes and kind of figure out my own way. And after that first initial 6 months of struggle, my next year in the business, I took 150 listings and got listed in the top 1% of the nation.
Wow. Wow. So I got to know is there a special book in there that helped with that? Which book?
There's a lot of them. One of my favorite authors at the time back then was Hopkins.
Tom Hopkins.
Tom Hopkins, Art of the Sale, which was a fantastic book.
Yep.
But a lot of those things don't apply today. So the world of sales has changed dramatically since the late 80s, early 90s. Now we're selling it a completely different way. But at the time, it was very, very effective, and I used a lot of those strategies. But I did learn about for sale by owners and expired listings and working a sphere of influence and farming from other mentors that I worked with. And I dove deep into those areas and created a lot of success there.
So at the age of 2021, you know what you're doing now. You're enjoying the career you've chosen, that path, and I think it's such a massive advantage to know that early that that's going to be what you're going to do, as opposed to the people that come in later. At the age of 24, you make the biggest step. You say, I'm going to have my own brokerage.
Yes. Yep.
So was there a mentor? Was there some help? How did that come about, especially at that age?
Well, what happened was me and a buddy started working together. There's a backstory behind that. But we became one of the first teams in Oregon, really. It was me and him and our assistant. And when we started to look at our production level, we recognized pretty quickly that if we had moved ourselves out of our own office, we were like number 2 in the county at our production level, right? Mm-hmm. So we're like, well, maybe we should just do that. Maybe we should move ourselves out of our office and be our own office. And so we found a gal that was thinking about selling her little company, and we bought her company. And all the agents left, and it was just me and him and our assistant. And then we started to grow from there. I will say that, over the next 15 years, we grew that from, basically nothing to 17 offices and became the largest independent company in Oregon.
I want to know what it's like for a 24-year-old Jim to talk to someone in their 40s or 50s and try to explain to them why you were the brokerage they needed to come work for?
Well, I'll tell you, I made a lot of mistakes. But I think what it comes down to, whether it's me at a listing appointment at 19, my
Yeah.
first year,
Okay.
trying to talk a retired couple into listing with me, which, I look like I might be there old enough to be their grandkid, maybe,
Right.
or whether it's trying to talk to somebody trying to recruit, it's the same thing. And that is what we're really selling is a vision of what we can do for you as a human being. And so it's building a relationship with you on the other side of the fence and saying, hey, listen, here's what I think I can do to help you with your goals. It's not about me. It's about what I can do for you. And I truly believe that I can help you. And I'm going to work harder than anybody else to make that dream a reality.
Yeah.
My advantage as an agent talking to potential agents was I had done it and I was successful. And I would always use that as a competitive wedge and say, I'm not a broker that hasn't done it. I'm somebody that's in the field doing it every day. That's a huge difference between me and maybe where you're at now. So I would use that as an advantage too, as a competing broker at the time. But I will say my number one mistake, which I think is as important as our successes as our mistakes, right? My mistake was for the first 5 years we had that company, I thought to myself, because I was a little intimidated by recruiting experienced agents, although I did, my number one goal was to recruit new agents because I thought to myself, egotistically, that I could bring a new agent in and help them create the same level of success that I did. So I started doing recruiting seminars every month, which I did for 5 years straight, where I'd do advertising, rent a hotel room, do a whole song and dance for 90 minutes, get people excited about getting a real estate license, help them find the school, and then help them get through the school, get them to the other side. And, it was a weaning process. You'd have 50 people in a room. You might get 2 at the end that would actually come to work for you. But what I found and what I teach now was the mistake that I made is I would end up with this basically, group of people that I didn't know it at the time, but they had an 86% attrition rate. So 86% of the people that end up in the business end up out of the business 2 years later. So as a broker, I'm investing all this time and energy into these people that are 8 to 9 times out of 10 are not going to make it in the business. And it wasn't about me being a good or bad trainer. It was just about them as human beings not being up to the task.
Right.
So then I eventually pivoted and said, wait a second, we've got to start recruiting experienced agents. And we took a whole different tactic.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I think that's very cool. That's going to be a great takeaway for a lot of people listening to the podcast. You're with John L. Scott now, which is a big. They're not independent. They're a regional, regional, right? And up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
How did you come to partner with them?
So what happened is I grew this office to 17 offices, and then I got recruited to start teaching for the National Association of Realtors, which I did for many years. I taught all the designation programs. And then I was passionate about teaching and I'm coaching and that kind of thing. So I did that. And I sold my interest in my company to my partner when I started to do that. And then I got recruited to come down and help another guy who had just opened a company, but he had bought this company, this John L. Scott company in Medford. And he came down and said, Jim, I want you to come down and just consult with me about how I can grow this company because I know you've grown companies. I said, I'll come down and consult with you, but I'm not going to go work for you. Well, he was a good recruiter. He brought me down, offered me a ton of money, and said, Jim, we want you to stay here. So we pulled the trigger and moved down. A little bit of a short, long story on that is he had bought the company in the Great Recession, 2008, and it was suffering. He had gotten it all the way down to 38 agents when I joined, and 2 agents left the weekend I joined. We were down to like 36 or 37 agents. We took that company, and we, over the next 10 years, went from $100 million in business to $1.4 billion in business. Top 500 companies in America. And we're competing with companies that are in Chicago and Atlanta and New Jersey and New York, LA.
Wow.
And we're in a population base of 80,000. Right. So we're crushing it at that level. That's how I got into this whole coaching gig, is people have asked me, how did you do it?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's go down that path real quick with coaching. You, a long time ago, I mean, you think of this is almost like in 2000, when you started kind of dabbling in the internet, with coaching.
Yeah.
So that was Real Estate Coach. or
erealestatecoach.com.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And so what was I'm sure that site's changed over the years quite a
It
bit.
has.
I actually looked at it yesterday and I'm like, oh, this looks very cool. I like the way, I mean, it's a very professional, modern looking site. I can't even imagine what it looked like when it first launched.
I have a whole story about that too.
Go ahead, let's hear it.
So when I started my coaching platform, I thought I had this whole vision of how I wanted to lay out, and I hired somebody to actually design the website.
Sure.
Which huge mistake, by the way. Anybody listening, don't ever do that. That's a big, big mistake.
Yeah.
I spent $150,000 on building this website out, and it completely failed. I mean, it was a massive, massive failure. Didn't make a dollar on the site. And then I found a platform that does all the same stuff for $2,000 a year, by the way. So anyway, it's been gone through many iterations. When I started, I was completely focused on agent coaching. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my passion and what I've done for years. I've helped agents go from, where they are to where they want to go. And I have one of the highest per agent productivity rates in the country, where our average agent's doing about $6 million a year, which is when you have 250 agents, that's pretty hard to do.
Yep.
So people have come to me and said, how do you get to that high level? And it's through our coaching. And so I built that coaching platform to kind of replicate that for agents that wanted to tap in and say, hey, I want to be coached like Jim's coaching, but I can't go to work for Jim because I'm in New Jersey, right? Or I'm in Atlanta, or I'm in, Florida or whatever, but I want the coaching. So that's what I built it for. What it became now, as you said, an evolution, is that now our primary focus, although we still coach a ton of agents, way over 1,000 agents we're coaching across the country. We still coach. Our main focus today is brokerage coaching. So we focus working with broker owners, office leaders, and team leaders to help them grow. And that's where my passion is now.
Yeah. I like the fact you mentioned broker owners and team leaders in the same sentence.
Yeah.
Because it really feels, with the advent of different models in the real estate industry, right? I mean, we know what Glenn Sanford's doing, and now Real's falling behind, and Fathom. And there's a bunch of them out there that seem so team specific. Like there really aren't any broker owners in those operations. However, there are still a ton of broker owners. A team is going to be slightly different than a broker, right? I'm not worried so much about some of those franchise things and all that good stuff.
Well, what's interesting to me about teams and brokerages, and I've seen the whole evolution. I was one of the first teams, as I mentioned. Mm-hmm. What teams are today is what brokerages were 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So what a good team does today is that they provide systems and a platform for agents to thrive that work underneath the team umbrella. The difference between what a team does today, though, in many cases, what a good team leader does is they provide leads and a plan for having leads. Yep. If I'm bringing my own leads, maybe I don't need to be part of your team, right? But if you're giving me a guidance and coaching and a system and a platform for leads to be handed to me or be given to me or delivered to me, this is the reason why I'm joining your team in most cases, right? Yeah. So this is the reason why a team leader can say you're going to be on a 50-50 split or 60-40 split, and that team leader is now making a profit on every person that's there. What brokerages used to do 40 years ago when we had 50-50 splits, and 60-40 splits, now we don't do that anymore. Part of the reason of the shift, by the way, is the keys to the kingdom. So the keys to the kingdom used to be held by brokerages and having listings, and they couldn't get to it through any other way than coming to the office. Then when MLSs came around and the internet came around, now there was that whole changed the whole dynamic, right?
Yep.
So that's the difference. But I think the interesting dichotomy, the challenge for brokerage owners is profit compression. So when you're a brokerage owner, and I coach a ton of brokerage owners, right? So profit compression means that the average brokerage owner is operating on a margin of 1% to 5%, if they're lucky. And there's very few of them that are at 7 to 10%, which I'm coaching to. I'm trying to get them to 10% plus. And we've achieved that in many markets. But when a 1% to 5% margin, you have very little room for error. On the other hand, a team leader has a much bigger margin. They're more like a 10 to 20 to 30% margin.
Yeah, you mentioned trying to coach them up to 10%. I'm just, this is kind of a natural lead in to what you mentioned earlier. Yeah. Recruiting experienced producing agents is probably a key piece of getting that percentage up.
Absolutely number one. If you can't recruit, you have to be, people get this mindset of what a brokerage owner is. And it's one of the first questions I ask in the seminars. What do you think your number one job is as a brokerage owner? And 90% of the time they'll say, well, it's deal doctoring or it's problem solving. Absolutely not. There's no deals to doctor and there's no problem solving to do unless you have agents working for you. Right. So it's recruiting and retention are the two number one priorities for top brokerage owners. That's their number one job. Just like I coach people and I say, listen, you're coaching your agents. Like a good brokerage owner is also a good coach. So you're coaching your agents to go out every day and prospect and lead generate and follow up and send thank you cards and do video and all the things you're coaching people to do. You have to be doing exactly the same thing as a brokerage owner leader, and you put the recruiting in front of that, right? You're doing the same thing on a recruiting standpoint.
You talk about attracting agents, right, versus chasing. Yeah. Can we talk about that process a little bit? How that really works, especially when you're dealing with experienced agents, right? Because I imagine it would be very easy to attract inexperienced agents.
Yes.
Just a thought, right? The ones you want working at your brokerage. How do you do that?
That's a great question. So the thing about experienced agents is they're often when you're first coaching a brokerage coaching student, they'll think, well, these people that are unrecruitable in my market, and people get this natural thought like they're never going to leave. They've been there 20 years, 30 years, wherever they're at the other company, and then one day they do leave. And my question is always like, how many times did you talk to them? Did you have a conversation with them? Yeah. And the reason why they didn't come to work for you is because you thought they were unrecruitable, and they were recruitable. You just didn't have the guts to have the conversation with them, right? So the question mark then becomes, how do I attract these top level agents? Like you're saying, attracting versus chasing. So my goal for my brokerage coaching students is I want them to be attracting, and having people call them 3 to 5 times a month to come to work for me. Like, I'm an experienced agent. I know you're doing a great job. I want to interview. That's my goal. But you don't get there automatically, right? It's just like agents. Agents want to have 3 to 5 people calling them saying, list my house, come show me a house. That happens over time. And usually it takes a couple of years of chasing, right? And here's the process that we're building a company that attracts agents. It's multi-layered, but number one is you have to have good agent productivity at your company now. So your agents have to be productive. Yep. You have to have a great reputation in the market. So if you've got some bad apples in there that are ruining your reputation every day of the week, they got to be fired. You have to have a great staff that are doing an exceptional job, that you can get testimonials from your own agents about how great a job they're doing. You have to have world-class marketing. So your marketing's got to be as good or better than all your competitors in your market. You don't have to be big to do it. We have a lot of technology now that allows us to be small and still do it the same way. We have to have a differentiation or a niche that makes us unique in the market compared to our competitors. And we've got to have a good tech stack so that our tech stack is as good or better than our competitors. And then number one, above all those things I just mentioned, is you have to be likable and they have to have a relationship with you as the broker leader. Wow. So if they don't like you and they don't know you and they haven't gotten to know you, they're never going to come to work for you. You can have all the things stacked up behind that I just mentioned and have it perfect. And at a 10, if they don't like you, they don't know you, they're not going to come to work for you. So what I tell my folks is you got to look at yourself in a different way. You got to look at yourself as you are the owner of an NBA team, an NFL team, and an NHL team. And what's that owner's job? Number one job is building his bench. Every day, everything he's thinking about is building that bench so he can win a championship. That's what your job is.
Yeah. I love the way you, it really does sound like you almost were talking about an agent dealing with their sphere. I mean, it's just, it's not a huge difference, but it's, I'm sure there are these aha moments in you're doing a one-on-one or you're in a webinar where people are just sitting there just going, dope,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Those moments that happen to all of us. I love talking tech a lot. I work for Rate My Agent, so it's what I do now. And I'd love to hear, with all that shiny object syndrome out there, it's just such a problem. And I've seen that for 2 decades that I've been in the industry.
Yeah.
Let's say you've got to give the top, what are the must things? Like there's these have to be there. These are pieces of tech that must be in your brokerage if you're going to be successful. Like I'm trying to coach you, you got to have this stuff in place. What are those things?
Today, for me, you would have to have, every agent's got to have a website platform for every agent. Okay. So when an agent comes to work for you, they got to be able to plug into a website.
Yep.
You have to have, which seems super small, but it's super important. You have to have a localized domain. So they have the domain that's under your company brand. It's so crazy to me how many companies start to coach and everybody's Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, crazy thing. No. We got one email for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So those are two things. I would say also a CRM. for every agent of some kind that they have access to. Whether they use it or not, it's a different story.
Right.
And then I would say also home valuation tool that's automated so that agents can plug in and put their clients on a home valuation platform of some kind, like Cloud CMA would be an example, something like that. You also, of course, have to be a paperless office. That's a given now.
Yep.
So you got to pick your paperless platform. Those would be the main things just to kind of get you on kind of an even playing field for everybody at the starting point.
Side note, I'm a massive fan of RPR, right?
Yeah.
So as a guy, I was at in the Fidelity National Financial family at the time, and got access through a CEO of an MLS who loved me and got trained up on RPR and taught a lot of agents. Like the mobile app for RPR is mind-blowingly good.
Yes.
Probably better than the MLSs, most of the MLSs in the country.
Great.
Yet the take rate is so low.
Yeah.
I'm just like, anyways, I'll get off my soapbox, but it sounds like you're of the same belief.
I just was talking about NAR RPR this morning on my coaching, and I was talking about their platform for neighborhood analysis and neighborhood data, and how that's such a great platform that nobody uses. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Need help with it, let me know. I love talking RPR mobile app.
Yes, for sure.
So another thing then, so you're helping these leaders, right? These broker owners, these team leaders, you're helping them, move up to that 10% or even higher. Part of it's got to be just getting more productivity out of what they've got there now, right? So that it's a motivation, I think, is the way you like to talk about that.
Well, you have to look at it as a multi-tiered approach. But when you're recruiting people, you're obviously hopefully recruiting people that are as productive or more productive than your current agents, right? So what's that sweet spot? For most offices, it's going to be recruiting people that are $2 to $10 million in production or higher, because your goal is to take them where they're at to help them move up to, if I'm at 2 million, I'll take you to 4 million. If you're at 4 million, I'm going to take you to 8 million. And then you're taking your own agents and you're quartiling them on a regular basis. And you're looking at your 4 quartiles, your bottom, your middle bottom, your mid-level, and then your top. And you're saying, how can I move the bottom level up to the next tier? And then that third tier up to the 4th tier. And I'm always coaching them and helping them and saying, what can we do to help get you there? And that takes deep conversations with people and really analyzing their business and saying, hey, listen, let's take a look at where you're at, where you're going. What do you need specific help with? Is it a listing presentation? Is it a buyer's presentation? Do you need accountability? What does it happen to be? And I will tell you, I use what I call the 2 Ps in my office. The 2 Ps when I'm talking to you as a new agent or an experienced agent, but primarily, especially new agents when they come in, I'll say, I measure you based on what I call the 2 Ps. It's either participation or performance. So participation means that I want to see you at office meetings. I want to see you at training events. I want to see you at coaching, accountability groups. I want to see you doing open houses. I want to see you engaged in the office. I want to see you participating with the company. Social nights, the whole thing. I want you to be completely immersed in this company. I want you to wake up, breathe, and sleep this company. Second is performance. I'm going to measure your performance. I'm also going to be watching that. But here's what I don't want to see. I don't want to see a situation where you're not performing and you're not participating. I can deal with you not participating if you're performing. If you're out there crushing it and you don't have time, I get it. You're performing. But if you're not doing both, then you're not going to stay with this company. It's one or the other or both. I want you to do both, but that's where I'm at. Are you good with that? And I'll say yes. I said, now I'm going to watch. So make sure you're good with it. And then we measure them by that performance. I'll say, hey, I see you're not participating. And I know participation leads to performance. Yeah. So that's how I measure people.
Every now and then you probably run into somebody who's not experienced, but you just go, oh, this person has what it takes to be successful in this business.
Yeah.
Is there is it like they come from a certain industry, or is there something out there where you just kind of go, oh, I should talk to this person because they were doing this in the past? Like I found that in this podcast, the number one gig that people had before they were a realtor, a lot of people were in hospitality, whether bartenders, servers, hotel business, that sort of thing, where all they did was take care of customers, listen to customers, help customers. Is there something like that?
Well, statistically, they say that nurses and teachers make the best realtors in the second profession because they're nurturing and they're education based. So, I think people that have the ability to be educational in their approach, I think can do very, very well and are patient, that have a good patience. I think in our industry today, when you're looking at the next generation of realtors, millennials and Generation Z, they will have a natural advantage over maybe somebody my generation that maybe didn't grow up with technology. And so the technology divide is going to be a big issue coming in the next, even right now, really 5 to 10 years, especially, where you're going to have this group of people that have embraced social media and video, and then you have a group of people that won't. And the people that don't are just not going to make it. And I'll say that probably one more layer that's being added this year, which no one saw coming, is AI. So the agents that are going to embrace AI and use it to scale their businesses, and brokerages as well, brokerage owners that don't embrace AI at scale are going to get left behind. There's just no question. And I'm like you, I'm careful of shiny object syndrome. I think you can get on the bleeding edge of technology, not the cutting edge. You got to be very careful, but you certainly have to deploy it because you're just not going to be able to compete.
Yeah. I think that average age of a realtor being in the mid 50s is going to quickly drop.
I agree.
Over the next 5 years, that'll be in the 40s in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I think right now you're going to see the NAR is already predicting another 200,000 agents leaving the industry in the next 12 months. So, and I'd say the vast majority of those people are people that can't keep up with technology, that, those are the people that are maybe aging out. A lot of them, they don't want to go through another down cycle. They don't want to face the technology change again, revolution again. They've already been through it a few times. I think that's a large part of it.
Yeah. Jim, you've also written a few books. I want to give you a chance to talk about that real quickly. Let's hear, what they were about. And second, is that process fun or easy or difficult? I mean, what
there's a story behind that, actually. So I wrote Make Millions in Real Estate. I also wrote a book called Presentations That Make Millions in Real Estate, and then another one called Sell Your Home in Any Market. They all did very well. I will say that I was asked to continue writing more books for the publisher, Amicom, which is a great publisher and out of New York. They're not self-published; they're all, normally published books. But nothing wrong with self-published books either. But the thing that I found was that you make about $1 a book. And so
and you figure it all out.
And the time it takes to write a book for me was 6 months of 8 hours a day for 6 months straight. That's how long it takes me to write a book. And I think I'm a pretty fast, capable writer. But 6 months at a computer every day for 6 months to make $1 a book just didn't economically make sense to me. I made money in other ways from seminars and webinars and other things I did. But I quickly found that I could monetize my information in other ways that was much more profitable.
Well, Jim, look, we've got to the part of the show now. We've gone right about the time I asked of you. And but there's this question that I've asked every guest since the first guest 8 years ago. And that's this very easy question. I think it's what one piece of advice would you give a new agent just getting started in the business? First
piece of advice, and the piece of advice I wish I would have adhered to myself, would have been starting a sphere of influence day one and starting putting those people in a contact system of some kind and drip on them forever. If I had done that, my business, as good as it was, probably would have doubled or tripled. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah. I've had this conversation with thousands of agents where when it comes to a CRM or just a spreadsheet, whatever it is, that if you just did this one thing, if you just called somebody, documented what you talked about, and then scheduled the next call in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, whatever, and just did that over and over and over, you'd be so far ahead of every other agent.
That's your business, right? Flag for next contact. Just keep doing it over and over. I agree 100%.
I keep referring to those notes and go, how was that trip? Oh, how was that? It was you just become part of their life. Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome. Jim, this has been great. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah. So they can head over to my real estate coaching company, which is letter E like elephant, realestatecoach.com. I can sign up for a free discovery call where we spend 30 minutes together, talk about your office and what you're doing or your team, individual agents and solo agents. We've got a ton of material over there as well.
Yeah. This has been fantastic. I want to thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Sessions. Please head over to ratethispodcast.com/RE sessions to leave a review or a rating and subscribe to the Real Estate Sessions podcast at your favorite podcast listening app.